Welcome back to the ACT Science. Today we are going to go over all of the answers for passage number 3. Passage 3 is a research summaries passage. Generally speaking, in a research summaries passage, there will be an introductory paragraph. In this case, we only get an introductory sentence. If there were a full paragraph, I would recommend reading the first and the last sentence just to get a feel for what it is that you are looking at. You can always go back and read more into the passage if you need to. Here we see that we're looking at 5 new drugs, and we're looking at penicillin-resistant bacteria. Here we see experiment 1 and the data table that goes with experiment 1. If I do a quick read through of this passage, I see that again we're looking at penicillin-resistant bacteria. We have 5 drugs that's shown in the table. They're on this plate for 7 days. And our drug-free control showed 50 colonies at the end of our 7 days. Then I come over to my data table and I start to draw my trend lines. Of course, I always draw my trend lines from the smallest number to the largest number. So on the top, I see my dosage going from small to large. And I see just the opposite in terms of the number of colonies. These are inversely proportional. In experiment 2, I'm looking at the same 5 drugs, but in this case, I'm keeping the same concentration and I'm changing the incubation time. Again, I'm going to draw my trend lines. So as I see an increase in incubation, I see a decrease in the number of colonies. Again, inversely proportional. So here in experiment 3, we're looking at a slightly different experiment. We're looking at the permeability or the ability for a drug to break through the cell membrane. So I want to pay attention again to my trends. I notice a trend here towards a larger molecular mass, but then I notice here that I don't have a general trend. So I'm drawing my arrows towards the largest value, but that's pointing out to me that I don't have a definite trend in this particular experiment. Okay, now on to the questions. Based on experiment 1, at the concentration of 10 millimolar, which drug was most effective at killing bacteria? This is a detail question, so I'm going to come back to my table from experiment 1. Now remember, in the passage it said that our control, which had no drugs, had 50 colonies at the end of 7 days. So in order for you to be the most effective, you need to have the fewest number of colonies. So if I go to my 10 millimolar section, I'm looking down for the fewest number of colonies after 7 days. And I see here that drug R only has 26 colonies, making it the most effective of the drugs. Question 14. Based on the results of experiment 3, which drug enters bacteria cells most quickly? There was a little line in our passage right here where it talks about the larger the permeability coefficient, the faster the drug is able to transfer through the membrane. So if I come back to my permeability chart, I notice that my largest coefficient, or my largest number, is there at 10 to the negative 5th at drug T. Now, if I have my trend lines drawn in there, I already know that that's my largest without having to go back through and analyze each one of those numbers. I've already drawn my trend lines. That's going to get me over to drug T, which is my answer choice H. Question 15. If experiment 2 were repeated with drug U and an incubation time of 3 hours, the number of colonies counted would most likely be what? So I'm going to come back to my table for experiment 2, and I'm looking for an incubation time that I don't have listed. I'm going to fall in between this 1 and this 6. This is what's called an interpolation question. It's a type of pattern question where I'm looking for a data point between 2 data points that already exist. So if I come down to drug U, I know that my number should be somewhere in between 41 and 18, which is actually an answer choice that they give us. Sometimes you'll see this question as an actual number for an answer choice. Sometimes you'll see this question as a range. But I see here that I should find an answer between 18 and 41, which is answer choice C. Question 16. Which of the following statement best describes the relationship between the molecular mass and the permeability coefficient of the drugs as shown in experiment 3? This is a pattern question. So I'm going to go back to experiment 3 and I'm going to draw my trend lines a little differently. So I see the increase in my molecular mass, and my general trend for permeability is a decrease in permeability, so that they would be inversely proportional. Now, I know that at drug T there is an exception, and it doesn't quite follow the pattern like we would like it to. However, my question is asking for the best answer, something that for the most part describes this trend. And for the most part, we can see that it's inversely proportional. So as one thing is increasing, the other thing is decreasing, which gives us answer choice F. Question 17. Which of the following statements best describes the relationship between incubation time and the number of live bacteria in experiment 2? If you drew your trend lines earlier, this pattern question becomes very easy for you. I drew my incubation time increasing to the right and my number of colonies increasing to the left, which shows me again that they're inversely proportional. So as one thing is increasing, another thing is decreasing. And we can see that this is pretty consistent all the way across. So that gets us to answer choice B. As the incubation time increases, the number of live bacteria decreases only. Again, it's a consistent trend. Question 18. What was the relationship between drug concentration and the drug's effectiveness in killing penicillin-resistant bacteria? I go to my experiment 1, and again, it's a pattern question, and if I've drawn my trend lines, this becomes a very easy question to answer. We looked earlier that if our drug concentration was increasing, that our number of colonies was decreasing. So here I've just gone ahead and highlighted the highest concentration, and we can see how low the numbers are in terms of colonies that are remaining, which will lead us to answer choice H. All 5 drugs were most effective at the highest concentration used. Now, these last 3 questions that we've looked at have all been pattern questions that will be very easy to answer if we've drawn those trend lines in ahead of time. And any second that we could save on a passage just gives us a little bit more time on the passages that we're struggling with. So I can't emphasize enough how important it is to draw those trend lines in as soon as you open up your page to that particular passage. Question 19. The experimental procedures used in experiment 1 and 2 differed in that in experiment 1, what? This is a detail question, and it's actually a very simple detail question, because if I go back and I look at the outline for experiment 2, there's a sentence in there that tells you exactly what has changed. So all the drugs were tested at the same concentration, and the incubation time of each culture was varied. And if I go to my answer choices, answer choice B says almost that exact thing. Incubation was varied while drug concentration was held constant. That's the last of our questions for this passage. Again, make sure that if you're missing these questions that you're going back and trying to understand why you are missing these questions. We'll see you again next time.